in the next few minutes. Get prepared. So their presentation is called The Future of Urban Forestry in California, Potential Proposals and Predictions. And they will provide an overview of recent developments in funding and legislation that will influence urban forestry programs throughout the state. So Walter Passmore's background: he has recently become the California State Urban Forester in June of this year. He leads the Urban and Community Forestry Program on behalf of CAL FIRE to carry out responsibility such as administration of the California Urban Forestry Act, urban and community forestry grants, and partnerships. Walter previously served in so many incredible roles. One as the Assistant Deputy Director and Community Assistant Forester for Mississippi Forestry Commission, City Forester for Dallas, Texas, Urban Forester for Austin, Texas, and Urban Forester for Palo Alto most recently. He began his career in forestry with the USDA Forest Service in 1989 and later began working in urban forestry when he was promoted to the state headquarters of the Mississippi Forestry Commission in 1999. His educational background includes a BA in Forestry and Natural Resources Management from Cal Poly and a Master's of Public Admin through Cal State University in Dominguez Hills. And then there's John Melvin. John is the Staff Chief of CAL FIRE Resource Protection and Improvement. John works for the California Department of Forestry, as I just said, managing the urban and community forestry, forestry entomology and pathology, forest biometrics, and demonstration state forest programs, urban and community forestry. John graduated from Humboldt State University with a BA degree in forestry and a minor in business. He is an ISA certified arborist and California Urban Forest Council certified urban forester. He is also a State of California registered professional forester. And John worked in private industry, utility forestry for 2 years prior to joining CAL FIRE.
Okay, so our presentation today, Future of Urban Forestry in California, it's going to be kind of a broad overview of where things are and where things are going and where things have been in the recent past, just to kind of give some perspective. Next slide. So a little bit about the potential of urban forestry in California is knowing a little bit about the past and how far we've come. It's important to remember that as we go forward to see the progress, because sometimes when we're doing our day-to-day work, regardless of where we are and who we work for and what we're doing, it's really hard to see that progress because, of course, we'd always like to see it happen faster. But starting with the new millennium, back in the day, the Urban and Community Forestry Program at CAL FIRE only was granting in the neighborhood of $1 to $1.25 million per year, and specifically just for tree planting. And that was good. And that was more funding than the program had had before. And it was exciting. And as time went on, as you can see from the slide here, things gradually ratcheted up with the passage of several different propositions as a result of advocacy from many of the people that have attended today and the broader urban forestry community as well. To here about 6-7 years ago, when cap and trade funding started to become available, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, you see it now branded as California Climate Investments. And that started off with just under $20 million a year, really about $18 million a year. And that has gradually grown with some hiccups here and there, including last year where there was no greenhouse gas reduction fund made available to us. But throughout this time, our program and many of our partners have been pushing statewide policy in relation to urban and community forestry. And that is weaving urban and community forestry into other policy and program areas so that it becomes something that's important in the broader policy arena within the state, and then also making sure that it becomes a higher priority at the local level. And so that's what we've been working at. And you can see that reflected with the budget of the Urban and Community Forestry Program. So we had the hiccup last year, but then as you can see, we've just received $30 million for the current fiscal year, $10 million in the governor's early action funding, as well as $20 million. And that's all general fund money. As the first time in a very, very, very long time that this program has had general fund dollars. And it shows the importance that's being placed on it by the governor and the legislature. Next slide, please. And you can also see, corresponding with that, the growth of the program over those years. When I joined the program in 2002, I was one of 4 staff. And I can tell you that trying to cover the entire south third of the state of California as the urban forester for CAL FIRE, even at the time where we had that much less money, was an extremely busy job. And that's where I met many of you, as well as then doing a similar stint in the northern third of the state. But you can see over the years, we gradually have grown the staff to match the increase in funding and the increase in responsibility. And especially in recent years, the increase in importance with the updating of the Urban Forestry Act in 2018 that made our program a must-have program for CAL FIRE rather than an optional program. That was a very big deal because there aren't very many programs, especially not grant programs, that have good enabling legislation like we have, and that are must-have programs. So that adds a lot of stability to what we do. During this time, we also started to see a lot of notable developments at the local level with consolidation of urban forest operations in some cities like Los Angeles and like Palo Alto, where Walter was the city urban forester prior to coming to CAL FIRE. Next slide, please. We're still realizing the potential of urban forestry in California. We're not anywhere near where we need to be. But like I said, looking back is important to see the progress. We did conduct a statewide urban forest tree canopy study in 2000. It was based on 2012 satellite imagery. The report was finally published in 2015. And the actual scientific paper published in 2016. And that determined that our statewide average tree canopy cover is right about 15%, which is 50th in the US. But it's important to keep in mind that that 15%, most of our cities, most of our urban areas were not put in places where there were traditionally forests. So that's a 15% tree canopy cover in places that may never have had tree canopy cover before, in many cases. So it's important to put that in perspective a little bit. I mentioned the Urban Forestry Act, and I think as work is done at the local level, it can be a very useful tool to you to show the findings and declarations and intent of the Urban Forestry Act. It's a decided issue in this state. It's very different from other places where they still have to make these arguments. The legislature and the governor, by signing it, determined in 1978 the importance of urban forestry in this state, and they declared all the reasons that it's important. And so that's a really important tool to have in your local policy debate and in your local ordinance discussion when it comes to urban forestry. In addition, we have some great statewide partners in the California Urban Forest Council. They predate our program by 10 years. And then in the early to mid 2000s, the establishment of the regional urban forest councils, which are still doing a lot of great work. And it's a great place to convene with folks from all different backgrounds working in our field in urban forestry. And then with California Relief, who serves as our volunteer coordinator and has a network of over 100 local urban forestry interested nonprofit organizations. So we have a lot of capacity and a lot of partnerships statewide that help to make our program and the urban forestry effort in California what it is today. And we're starting to see that develop for the urban wood portion of our industry as well. And it's exciting because it's taking a very similar path. It's just growing much faster. And then you heard earlier from Senator Caballero about the voluntary tax contribution bill that just passed. that will establish a fund that our program will have access to. It remains to be seen how much revenue that will generate, but it's exciting nonetheless to potentially have another funding source, and one that would be ongoing. And so we're looking forward to ramping up and starting that program as we start to see what kind of revenue it generates. Lastly, with our CCI grants and bond fund grants, and really with this year we anticipate with our general fund grants, we have been funding wood utilization projects. In fact, we actually are underway with our first combined bioenergy and biochar project as well. And so that'll be a first for us. And we also launched this year for the first time urban forest workforce development grants as a project type. And so we are waiting to see what we get from that. We have invited project applications, and so we do anticipate funding some of those this year. And I would say urban lumber, biochar, and other products, not only are they becoming more marketable, like the slide says, but they're becoming more recognized fairly rapidly, thanks to some of the various efforts with street tree revival, with urban wood rescue and lumber cycle in San Diego, and some of the other wood utilization efforts out there. People are starting to understand that this is a valuable resource. And there's an acceptance of it because of the broader urban forestry movement having engaged people at the local level about these things, and that, not wanting to see good trees go to waste when they have to come down as determined by qualified professionals. So I think that it's really important that we continue to pitch the whole cycle of sustainability in this effort, that we maintain engagement not only on the front end with tree planting and care, but on the back end with what we do with those trees when they can no longer serve the purpose that we put them there for. Next slide. And Walter's going to take it from here.
All right. Well, thank you, John, for describing the potential that we have in California. As you can tell from our past, we've come a tremendous way. We've done a lot in the urban forestry sector to grow California's urban forests into what they are today. But we also see that we have a long way to go to reach our goals, and they are some lofty goals. But California is the most populous state in the nation. California is a leading innovator in the world in many areas, including urban forestry. So I'm going to touch on some bullets. These are really motivators to accomplishing change. And John touched on the funding that has been invested through the California Climate Investment Strategy. Obviously, that's been really important. It will continue to be important for some number of years to come, but the intent of that is to go away eventually, and to have mechanisms in place that we can continue to fund projects. So that's where initiatives like the Urban Wood Network and all of the projects that are going on in the urban forestry sector are so important, is so that we can speed up this momentum to accomplishing bigger goals for California and its residents. We need to address extreme heat, and there has been a resolution passed to do that. At present, there is no specific funding connected to it, but the legislature has recognized that extreme heat is a critical issue in California. People are actually dying in Southern California during the winter from extreme heat events. So it's an issue that is really important to all of us. We have proposals that are being considered right now to have closer collaboration between urban greening and urban forestry. Obviously, to us in the industry, those have been connected the whole time that we've been implementing practices in the field. However, just recently where they recognized how closely that they collaborate together and how closely the programs need to collaborate in order to implement the most effective nature-based solutions. So we are looking at increased funding to be shared between the programs, and we don't currently know what the split is going to be, but it's more money. We've done a lot of,
I will speculate, because I can do that without getting in trouble. I will speculate that we will split that funding 50-50, and we'll have $50 million a year next year and the year after. And if you need a goal, you can reach out to the Natural Resources Agency to advocate for that.
Well, thank you, John. I didn't want to be so bold as to throw that piece of information out. We've obviously been working a lot on equity and inclusion, and this is a cross-cutting goal across all of our program areas. We have a lot more work to do here, but I think you will see it more infused in everything that we do. We just heard a presentation recently that Cal EnviroScreen 4.0 is going to be utilized in the very near future. So expect future grants to use that updated screening tool to identify where the work is needed most. And obviously, CAL FIRE has been committed to applying funds and applying assistance where it is most needed. This is just going to further focus that goal for us. The California Urban and Community Forestry Strategic Plan implementation is underway, and we're obviously applying all of our resources to accomplishing those broader goals. We're still trying to interpret and discern how best to implement some of those strategies at the local level. And it does look different in different places. So those are really kind of broad goals that we're looking at. How do we best implement those in conjunction with our local partners? And that's a really good segue into partnerships. CAL FIRE is not in this alone. We play a facilitator role to get funding from the state level to the local level, where it turns into actions on the ground. But even if you look at grant funds and significant amounts of money that are now being applied, $30 million in the scope of everything that's happening in the urban forestry industry in California is really a tiny motivator. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the billions of dollars that are being spent in the industry. So we are just trying to support what's going on in our industry and steer the ship a little bit. And
real quick on that, Walter, as far as the industry, that's at $3.6 billion as of 2009 per the study that we conducted, and 60,000 jobs. And if you remember, 2009 was not a good year. That was the bottom of the recession. So we are going to be reconducting that study this year, as well as the tree canopy study. So we'll have some new information for everybody in the near future.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, John. Same with the national funding from the U.S. Forest Service Urban and Community Forestry Program. It's a small amount, but it is influential to funding some of our statewide partners and statewide impact projects, such as projects that we do through the California Urban Forest Council, California Relief, West Coast ISA. Those are some of our partners that have previously implemented statewide impact projects. And so now that we've heard about potential and proposals, I'm going to make some projections. And I do not have a crystal ball, but these are some of the areas that I think we need to move towards. Policy and legislation, broadly, I think that we need to implement the policy for no net loss of canopy through cities. You heard earlier about wood utilization policy. Well, the wood's only going to be there if we retain and expand our urban forests. So no net loss of canopy is very simple to understand, but a profound policy that I think can really change the outlook for the future of urban forestry across our state. I know that it was really meaningful in Palo Alto, where I was before I came to CAL FIRE. We had a significant increase in tree canopy the 20 years prior to when I got there, and an even larger increase after we implemented the no net loss of canopy policy. In fact, we doubled to tripled the percentage increase in canopy annually because of that policy in a large part. So we are going to be looking at ways to require consideration of that and encourage local organizations to implement that policy. We also need to do a lot more outreach. This conference is great, but I think to a large part we're talking to the choir. We need to get our message out far beyond the boundaries of our comfortable industry connections here. We need trees to be a household name, or trees need to be seen as the simple solution for these huge daunting problems that we have worldwide, whether it's climate change or social equity. Trees are an essential part of the solution for big problems, for our learning environment, for nature deficit disorder, and the list goes on. And you all probably know as well as I do all of the great benefits of trees, but we need everyone else in the state of California to hear the same message. On operations, I think that we need more best practices to be implemented. Our implementation is really inconsistent at the local level. There is no standard established in a lot of cities for cyclical maintenance. And we know how important it is to inspect trees on a regular basis and perform maintenance activities on a regular basis. It can't just be when a huge branch breaks off or one of the neighbors complains. We have to be more proactive than that. I also want to touch on the notion of encouraging cities to do public maintenance on public trees. It is all too common for municipalities to delegate maintenance to the adjacent property owner. And a lot of adjacent property owners do not have the technical expertise or the funding to be able to properly maintain trees. It really needs to be done by a professional who has an overarching view of what's best for trees. So we are going to be encouraging best practices to be further developed at the local level. And with that, onto risk management and assessment, also something that can be inconsistent between localities and between organizations. So hopefully we will become more standardized with how we assess tree risk and how we manage tree risk, whether that is for emergency situations, whether that is for park maintenance, whether that is for insurance purposes. We want to have more consistent standards that are applied across industries. assessment and feedback. We need to strive for continuous improvement in our system. So programmatic, I think that cities really need to be taking a look at their programs, knowing what they're doing well now, where there are opportunities to improve, where there are potential future threats, so that they can prepare for those. And same thing with our nonprofit organizations, same thing with our private businesses that are in the urban forest industry. There needs to be a regular assessment process that happens. For key metrics, a lot of our funding in the past has been based on California climate investments, which sees carbon as the primary metric. But I would suggest that canopy cover is probably a more important metric for our industry than carbon is. So we need to be continuously promoting those important key metrics, measuring those, and figuring out where we are on progress to our goals. And then finally, we need to identify opportunities to accomplish compatible goals that are either revenue neutral or cost recoverable. I will use the no net loss of canopy as an example, because I recently talked with Nancy and some other colleagues about how to implement this policy, and I got a little bit of eye rolling, but there are ways such as incorporating conditions of approval in permits that are either revenue neutral or cost recoverable that we can implement and not require additional funding to do so. So there's a lot of mechanisms to move forward on these projections. Some of them are based on funding. Some of them are based on investing the energy and the enthusiasm of our industry that people who are attending this conference are really good at. So we want to encourage you to keep up the good work. And with that, okay, a couple more bullets on projections. So financial management, it's encouraging for CAL FIRE that we have received general fund dollars because they are more flexible for us. In the same way, I would encourage all of our organizations to diversify your revenue stream. Think about grants as a way to progress on aspirational goals beyond your incremental budgets or beyond what's planned. It's a way to do that next thing, to take the next step, to establish a new benchmark that you work from. I would encourage you to distribute cost. Not always easy to do, but we need to be good financial managers as well as good managers of trees. Make frugal decisions and wise investments. And then again, on the partnerships, diverse and inclusive participation. The urban forest industry has been really good at including a lot of individuals from very diverse backgrounds, from diverse cultures, and we've certainly benefited from it. But it also needs to be customized to unique individuals. So when we are talking to this diverse audience, everyone needs to feel like they are part of something that unites them as a group. And I think trees and urban forestry are a great way to do that. So, partnerships are truly important to our success. And with that, John and I are glad to entertain any questions.
I did see one here from Mike Bourne. Says, how do we address planting trees on private property, the largest group of landowners? In fact, we are doing that to some degree with our grants. We have projects that have been planting on private property, but it needs to happen more, and there needs to be a way to incentivize it at the local level. Where there's never going to be enough money from the state level to do everything that needs to be done. So it's time to think a little outside the box on that. And a great example of that is the relationship between the Sac Tree Foundation and SMUD in the Sacramento area with the utility. They've planted over 600,000 trees in the last 25 years on private property, including in my yard. So that's a really good example of how a partnership can occur. And I'm sure there's others. And let's see. I'm looking to see if there's any other recent questions in the event chat, at least, or in the Q&A.
John and Walter, can you hear me? Nancy?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. Of course, my screen just froze, so I had to come in and out, or out and back in. One of the things I see, and I'm sure you see, and I know, John, historically, you've done a lot of work, kind of interagency work, in getting other agencies to understand their role in urban forestry. But, we're seeing now with COVID and public health, and, who's responsible for what. So one agency is responsible for air quality. Another agency is responsible for public health. Another agency is responsible for water. Everybody kind of still is in their silos. And yet, if we all came together and started focusing in a more central way, benefits of a healthy urban tree canopy, we could really move the needle. And anyway, it's just observation we're all trying to get at. But at the end, if a city's not responsible for air quality, they're not going to address it, for example.
Well, I think it at the state level, you see this changing a little bit in that when large state planning efforts are conducted, that all the agencies are involved in it. So when you see a climate investment plan, for instance, it makes the rounds through all the agencies, and they bounce ideas off each other, and they kind of collaborate on creating that. There needs to be more of that at the local level, and you see it in some places and not others. So I'd say there's a lot of inconsistency. You see it in some of the places you would expect to see it, typically with wealthier cities, cities that have more resources, and that's where we need to do more work, is in convincing some of the cities that may have a lower level of resources that this should be a priority for them, and it really should, because if those cities want to have more resources, they have to be a place that people want to be. And without fail, that includes tree canopy. It's not the only reason, but it's a very important reason. And so it's also important to the health of the people who live there. And that's the bottom line. So where a lot of the work needs to occur is to raise priority for urban forestry at the local level. And we have to keep pushing some of the same things we've been pushing, but we also have to push it in a different way. And one way is that no net loss of canopy. I think that's something a lot of people can get on board with, even if they don't think about trees a whole lot. Do they want to leave, what little tree canopy they have, do they want to leave that, at least that, for the next generation? Or do they want to be the ones responsible for there being even less available?
Or maybe even more. There's a concept.
So you play on their hopefulness, and you also play on their sense of guilt.
He's a parent.
It works so well. Do we see any other questions for John and Walter? Anybody?
There might be one in the questions.
They're not all in order, I've noticed.
No, they aren't. I'm going to kind of go through here again.
This platform is very different.
Here it is. Who should determine what trees should be qualified to be planted, and how do we keep out the trees that we don't want to be replanted? Well, Walter, you
Okay.
can talk about that at least from the perspective of our program.
Yeah, so let me comment on that. I heard, Matt Ritter's presentation earlier talking about select tree and how to go about thinking through the future of your species selection. And what I've promoted for many years now as a professional is an attribute based selection, and not creating a list, because lists are bound to be obsolete in the very near future, whether it is because trees are no longer popular, or they're not grown, or some new pest comes along. Don't create a list. Pick out the attributes that you think make up good trees for your area, whether that is drought tolerance or salinity tolerance, or the the nature of the amount of benefits, or the urban wood potential. Whatever those attributes that you want for your tree, pick those out, and then lead people to selection systems that will give them a range of options, because people don't want to be put in a box. If you say you can only plant this one species of tree on your block, they may say, well, I don't even want to plant a tree if that's my only option. But if you say, here's the kind of trees that are best for our community, and here's where you can pick out the 12 that meet your criteria, they're more likely to pick one and plant it, and really
Absolutely.
appreciate it for their lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I've been a non-fan of tree lists for as long as I can remember. So I would completely agree with what Walter said. I see another question from Stephen Prey. There's actually two parts to this question. When are the 21-22 grant opportunities expected to be announced? We are in process right now. We have invited back project applications. Walter, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you said 53 have been invited
Correct.
back.
53 applications.
Not all of those will be funded, obviously, so that we've moved on past the concept stage. We're in the project application stage. We expect to award grants in December, early December, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And part B, is it anticipated that CAL FIRE will have grants for natural area vegetation management plans and fire fuel reduction projects? CAL FIRE has other programs that do that. The Urban and Community Forestry Program will not be doing projects like that anytime in the near future. Where that program, the Urban and Community Forestry Program, is really the only urban-focused program at CAL FIRE, and it's going to stay that way as long as I'm around.
We do work closely with the other programs, though, to refer applicants to appropriate programs if their objectives fit those program goals.
Yeah, so if you do have projects that you are interested in having funded or talking with somebody about it, we can certainly get you to the right people.
John, there's a question from Gail Benton Shoemaker. Is there a summary of the Urban Forestry Act? And I will get that link and put it in the chat.
Yep.
And then
Yeah,
there's a.
I can tell you it's the Public Resources Code, and it starts with section 4799.06. And so you can search California Ledge Info for that, but I'm sure they'll also put the link in the chat, and that'll be an easier way to get to it. You can also find it linked on the CAL FIRE Urban and Community page.
And then there's another question that's really targeted to our program, our Circle 4 grant program, and Robin is saying that they weren't given any choice in trees. We have an extensive tree list, but it may not have included trees that they typically plant or would desire. And the reason is we are working with Matt Ritter on that grant, this very targeted grant, to introduce those underutilized species to see how they do. So to see if those trees are going to thrive into the future as we hope, where so many trees are suffering now because of climate change. So Robin, we can talk. We don't mean to be punitive. We just have guidelines that were approved by CAL FIRE.
Yep, and we're pretty rigid about them. We don't want to see small statured species because it's a statewide pot of funding and we want the maximum amount of benefits. We don't, we shouldn't have a forest of crepe myrtle or anything similar to that size. If that means that we need to pay to create larger planting sites, we are fully willing to do that and have. We would rather spend $1,800 per tree and see a larger planting site long term than spend $150 per tree to see something like a crepe myrtle or a redbud planted. Because in the long run, that's still going to be a win. I would also say to the other question there about WUI open space inside city limits, yes, there are other CAL FIRE programs that can pay for plans like that. And in fact, our urban forest management plans can include WUI section. It needs to be, any management plan we fund should be inclusive of the entire jurisdiction, not just the public spaces, not just the WUI spaces, not just the street side, but the whole resource. So I think we may be able to help you on two fronts there.
So we're striking out with Robin here, but she's also saying they can't plant under power lines.
We don't want to plant under utility lines.
We don't plant
with our funding at all. We're not interested in that. Utilities should pay for that. And if they don't, you need to get on their case about it. I mean, that's the bottom line.
A lot of utilities are now. You can turn to your public utility, yeah.
There are a lot of places we can. There are a lot of places we can plant, and we choose not to plant under utility lines because we want maximum benefits.
Thank you for clarifying that, John. Great questions and
they are
great points. You can see I'm Nancy Hughes, and you'll see I posted the ledge info for the urban forestry
act.
And also for those of you who've been here all day, and you can see that Rose just also posted in the chat where you can sign up for your CEUs. And I'm not meaning to cut Walter and John off. I just wanted to point that out while it's fresh in front of me. So any other questions?
I blinked out there for a second. I was too excited about the CEU sign up. Well, I clicked on it and it totally knocked me out as I thought it opened another window, but it didn't.
Well, I think we're going to have a slide. Deb will put a slide up in a second. I just want to make sure everybody has gotten their questions asked. And that's Rose.
Okay.
So thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate what you've done. John, what you've been doing for making the change, and Walter, how thrilled we are is to have you in this new leadership position.
Absolutely. Thank you for all of your support. We really appreciate it.